Bore da, croeso, and welcome to Motivate Me on a Saturday morning. Now, I don't often talk about very specific things to do with the menopause in cafe because I realise we've got gentlemen on here and we've also got young mothers on here. But I've had so much post, I think, this week around the menopause and some of the misconceptions about the menopause that it's allowing me to have a little bit of a rant. So I don't want to have a rant, but I want to really clarify what is the menopause in terms of your health and why you can't say I'm done with the menopause, because there is no done with the menopause, okay? Your menopause, once you're in your menopausal phase, it's like having gone through puberty. You can't reverse puberty. And menopause is a stage of a female life where your hormonal changes are permanent. So whilst the transition is kind of horrific for many, it's very easy for others, the long-term effect of not having estrogen affects all of us, okay? If you are a woman over 40, you will soon start to see the difference in your body and the way it reacts and the way it behaves, simply because of the lack of hormones. And I was on well, as you know, YMCA bought my course, and I was on this group ethics thing and talking about it. And even instructors were thinking that when we teach people with a menopause, it's only in the perimenopausal phase. So let's try and work out the difference there. And then I'm going to try and motivate you to understand why it's important that you need to keep moving. So the perimenopause phase starts anyway between the ages of, say, 40, 41, and is usually done and dusted by the age of 51. So 51 is considered to be the mean average. That span of around 10 years, okay, and your menopausal symptoms, perimenopausal symptoms can last 10 years, you'll get all the symptoms of your premenstrual syndrome. So those of you who have been regularly menstruated all your life, you will know in the week leading up to when your period starts, you will start to feel grumpy, you'll start to feel bloated, you won't be able to sleep. You might get more stress incontinence, you'll be craving sugar, you get a hormonal outbreak of spots, and then your period starts and you go, oh, that's what it was all about. That's why I was feeling like that. And there's a noticeable difference in your mood and in your change. There's quite a lot of research going into how this affects women doing sports and things like that, because you're far more energetic 2 weeks after your period and you don't perform as well during your period. That is like a mini menopause, all right? So your PMS is where your estrogen levels start to drop. So that week before your period starts, where your estrogen starts to drop, is what happens to you over the age of 40. So as you go over the age of 40, your estrogen starts to drop on a more regular basis. And so you start to see some of the more kind of PMS symptoms that you see on a regular basis. You might have swollen tender breasts, you might feel a little bit bloated, you might be more irritable, you might cry more, you might be a little bit more angry, and it just gets worse and worse, okay? So the things that stop it getting worse and worse is, say if you're on the pill, so if you're on a combined pill, you're already taking the hormones, or if you have the coil, okay, you already have the combined hormones in the coil. So you might not notice that transition into menopause as much. If you exercise regularly and you eat well, you create your own kind of version of estrogen to keep your body moving. So if you eat a lot of plant-based foods, they have that phytoestrogens where you're eating the estrogen food. But if you have a poor diet, then, you know, it's not the same. The other thing that happens is that it is the speed that you go through the menopause. So if you are somebody who you're on the pill, you're active and you're eating well, your estrogen levels are going to come down slowly. If you're somebody who's had cancer, and whether that's breast cancer, ovarian cancer, bowel cancer, the chemical, if you've had chemotherapy at all, 75% chance it will kill your ovaries off, all right? There is a chance that they don't get affected, but 75% chance-ish, okay? Don't exactly quote me on that. So that means you could have no estrogen at all. So you go from having a full cupboard to nothing, okay? Whereas in a natural menopause, you still probably have, you're usually 80 years old before it's completely gone altogether. So even from 50 to 80, you're still on that decline. If you've had a hysterectomy, and in that hysterectomy, they removed either one or both ovaries, you have no estrogen, okay? None at all. And so you have a very hard menopause. Now, women who have zero estrogen have a higher chance of having a cardiac arrest, cardiovascular problems, having osteoporosis, and having dementia. And that is because estrogen offers you an anti-inflammatory protective mechanism for your joints, for your bones, for your gut, and for your heart. So without estrogen, you're more likely to get furring up of the arteries, you're more likely to have a higher blood pressure, and you're more likely to have high cholesterol, regardless of your diet. If you have been eating the same kind of foods, you will still get this build up because your hormone levels changes, but maybe your diet hasn't. So you kind of have to make your diet a little bit cleaner, as they say. The other thing that happens with the fat because of estrogen is the distribution of your fat changes. So for a female shape, it's usually called a pear shape. We tend to hold more fat around the hips, underneath the arms here, but are usually quite slim in this area. An apple shape means that you're more likely to hold the fat in the middle. Okay, so gentlemen tend to be more apple shaped and women tend to be more pear shaped. It's not always the same, okay? But the changes between your subcutaneous fat, the ones you can pinch, and the intra-abdominal fat means that when you are going through the menopause, because your estrogen levels are dropping, you increase the amount of fat inside the gut, which makes you more apple shaped and rounded in the middle, but increases your chances of having coronary heart disease. And I find it so frustrating because that information is out there. They'll give you statins, but they won't give you HRT. It is madness in my mind. Now, you might not want to take HRT, okay? There might be reasons why you don't want to take HRT. For example, you might have breast cancer in the family, and you might think, I'm not going to take HRT. Or you just don't get on with it. You know, it makes you feel gizzy or it makes you feel a bit sick. Go and get it changed. But without HRT, how on earth do we survive this increased, 5-fold increased chance of having a coronary heart disease after menopause? Okay, that means over the age of 60. How do we change that a woman breaking a hip over the age of 65 because of osteoporosis, we've talked about this before, shortens their lifespan? And most people will die within 1 year of having a broken hip. This is why we're doing this balance work today, because falling over and breaking a bone has long-term consequences. If you've broken a bone, go and get an osteoporotic test, okay? You can have what's called a DEXA scan. So you need to change diet and exercise, but you also need to change your mindset to think like, this is not a phase that I get over. When you've gone through the perimenopause phase, okay, that horrible fluctuation phase, and sometimes you'll notice it because you might have heavy periods. Let's go back to the period part. That doesn't mean it's done and you're fine. It just means your body is stopped being fertile. You're not producing any eggs, and so you don't have a menstrual cycle, okay? But without the menstrual cycle, your estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are still dropping down. And unless you address that issue, you're putting yourself at risk of being ill. So things like your joints aching, all right? Your bones ache in the morning, your elbow aches, your ankle aches. You think, oh, I can't do that because it hurts. It is estrogen, lack of estrogen, that's making it hurt, because estrogen is anti-inflammatory. What else is anti-inflammatory? Nutrition, plant-based food, exercise, including all of the things we were doing today. Warm, move, open your fingers, close your fingers, reach, move your hips, move everything else like that. And that's because you have a fluid within inside your joint that nourishes the cartilage and protects you from having arthritis. You can have a diet that is anti-inflammatory. Go on the Arthritis Foundation and have a look on that. The final element, of course, is dementia. And that's because estrogen influences your brain health. And we've talked about this in the talks when we talk about gut health. That gap between your brain and your skull, where you have that cerebral fluid. Then remember, that gap increases at night. The cerebral fluid flows over the brain and cleanses out any excess stress, any excess hormones, anything that you've been carrying about in the day. So you wake up the next day refreshed. When you go through the menopause, you can't sleep, you have disturbed sleep, you have night sweats, but it has an impact on your brain and your cognitive function. You can't think straight, you can't remember things. How do we help our body sleep to improve brain health? All the way through this, we've been talking about gut health and brain health, but not in relation to menopause. And the reason why we need to talk about in relation to menopause is hormonal. You cannot stop your hormonal levels dropping when you are no longer fertile. If you're over 51, you are no longer fertile probably. Okay, maybe there's some of you might be, okay? Depends on your diet, depends on your genetics, but majority of women are not fertile. Definitely by the age of 60, you are not fertile. If you are no longer fertile, you no longer have the cycle, but you still have a diminishing amount of estrogen year on year. You can't take your foot off the pedal. You can't think, I'll do it next week, I'll do it tomorrow. There is no waiting. It won't get better. It's just gone. You've got to make it better. And it's just a responsibility. And I think like we all have a responsibility to kind of think like, what's important? What's important? Do you want to live a long life but be on medication and have people looking after you or be in a wheelchair or all of those things? Or do you want to live a long life where you feel happy, where you feel energetic, where you can kind of go, yeah, I'm going to go and do that. Seize the moment, as they say. Don't put off doing 15 minutes of exercise because you've got to tidy the house. Don't do those things. It's not worth it, okay? Your house, if it's untidy, will still be untidy when you die. But if you die because you have not prioritized your health with easy peasy things, all you have to be is this, consistent, okay? You make sure you move at least 30 minutes a day. You make sure that you eat your 5 fruit and veg a day. You make sure that you take time out to do social things, to be a human, to interact, to sing in the choir, to do those things that bring you joy in your body and reduce your stress. Having those things there, they're within your grasp. They don't have to cost any money. You can just take them and use them. I'm so sympathetic to people going through the menopause. But you have to understand that you can't change it. It's like trying to stop the wind blowing. It is not going to go anywhere. It is just diminishing. And along with the aging process, it speeds it up. Live a long and happy, healthy life. If you're not going to take HRT, you be absolutely pristine in your diet. And I'm just feeling like it's a bit of a rant, this. I don't mean it for it to be a rant, because there's lots you can do. Now, I'm one of those women who lost both her ovaries back in 2005. So that's, how many years ago? 8 years ago now. And I struggled. And it's made my life passion to help women going through the menopause to say, we can change things. We can do things together and improve. So look after your estrogen level, look after your bones, make time for you, make time for exercise. And, you know, I'll still be online because to me, 20 minutes sometimes is all I can fit in my day. And there are times in the day where I don't want to exercise, but I can because you're waiting for me. Right, off you go. I'm off to see Christmas fairs. I'm going to go find Carrier Glass. I'm going to buy my husband some stained glass just for his Christmas present, but don't tell him. Take care. Hold very powerful.